Hey Duke, how you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good, Wes. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm doing all right. I got it moved. We were just
Hey,
joking about it before the recording start. It looks all clean. It looks like I have everything all organized, but looks are deceiving. Don't shift the camera to that side of the
or
that
tilt
side of
it
the room.
down. Don't angle it down.
Right, right. No, I know this Unit 7031. I guess going back to a serious subject. And before I get into that, some people like this conspiracy corner thing, and then some people absolutely hate it. There's really no in between. And I guess for the public, it's something we're just doing as an extra for extra content. As most of I'm sure the listeners, I'm interested in a lot of other things besides Sasquatch. I would say 90% of my interest is Sasquatch. 10% is all these other weird things. And so it's kind of nice to break away and just talk about some other things that we don't get a chance to talk about on the show, or I don't really get a chance to talk about on the show. And I know with World Bigfoot, you kind of feel the same way. It's kind of hard to talk about like Unit 731, like we're going to talk about tonight, or the Phil Snyder incident. It's really, I mean, how do you bring that up on a Bigfoot show? But
Yeah,
there's a lot of conspiracies, and there's a lot of very interesting things in this world beyond Bigfoot. And I have a sneaky suspicion some of these things tie into each other. Maybe not be directly related, but definitely tie into every other subject. I could be wrong, but
well, I agree with you, Wes. I think that that's the way it is. I think that if you actually do enough research on this stuff, and every single conspiracy thing that's happened that we can get information on, the dots aren't going to connect between everything. But there's certain things that if you want to understand, or a clear understanding of what might be going on with some of these other conspiracies that they've got going, then you sort of need to know the background on some of these earlier ones first before it begins to make any kind of sense. Otherwise, it's like walking in the middle of the movie and going, I don't know what the hell's going on here. Who are these characters? What are they doing? What's their motivation to do this? This doesn't make any sense, So it's like anything else. You got to start at the beginning, begin at the beginning. And one of the reasons that we're getting sidetracked on this whole thing, and you'll understand at the end here, is because this is one of those pieces of history that really nobody should be happy about. And it basically got swept under the rug. Everybody knows about the Nuremberg war trials, that what was done after World War II. The Germans had to pay reparations. They had a bunch of their higher-up guys that were captured, put on trial, and then executed. And, as rightfully so, they were held responsible for war crimes. Now, on the other hand, you've got Japan. And yes, there were some of the military that were actually tried and held responsible for their war crimes. But that is not the case in what we're talking about tonight, Japanese Unit 731. And 731 was actually euphemistically had an interesting name. Let's see if I can find it here.
yeah. And as you look,
The Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department. That
that's
was
what I
their
was going to
cover
say.
name for it. Yeah, the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department. And it was formed in 1932. And this was pretty much something that was being done almost directly by Emperor Hirohito, who's a microbiologist, and was also assumed to be of divine origin, not just royal blood, but divine blood. Everybody was obliged to follow whatever the emperor said. He was direct descendant of the previous emperors. They were all of divine blood, too. He was like a living god, just like the concept of the pharaoh in ancient Egypt. That's the way they looked at the emperor in Japan. So whatever he said went, absolutely. And he wasn't telling them what was going on here with the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department. But really what it was a cover for studying microbiological warfare techniques and medical things having to do with being able to treat not only your own troops in the field more effectively, but inflict more damage on the enemy more effectively. And again, in 1925, Japan signed on to the General Geneva Protocols, and one of the things included in there is no biological warfare. So here it is, 7 years later in 32, they're setting up this facade for this epidemic prevention and water purification department, so that they can secretly conduct this sort of information gathering, if you want to use that euphemism for it. But
use it lightly.
Yeah.
Some of the worst stuff I've ever seen or ever heard.
Well, unfortunately, it's time to jump into it. Again, get back to Hirohito, just to keep in mind the Japanese mindset on following this guy's orders. He was the 124th emperor. Think about that. What are we on, like 44 presidents? And we know presidents is power being absolute or word is law and having divine power like they did with the emperor. So they have this incredibly long tradition of following whatever he wants to do. So anyway, being a microbiologist, he understands the killing power of disease and helped put together this unit. It actually covered a 6 square kilometer area, had over 150 buildings, including a crematorium with giant smokestacks that were belching black smoke all the time, which, as it turned out, was the black smoke of incinerated human bodies. And this is going on round the clock. Unlike the Germans, the Japanese didn't care if their victims were actually dead or not before they were dumped into the flames to be disposed of. Maimed and mangled bodies, dripping blood, and organs still hanging out. You know, so, like I said, a lot of them still living. We're just thrown into the fire on a regular basis. Prisoners kept in cages. Some had live rats or other animals in the environment they were in to see the effects of, you know, the bites and whatnot that they would get so that they could treat that in their own soldiers when these things happen in the field. They infected some of these people on purpose with diseases and then observed them for weeks or months to see the effects of the disease on their body before sending them off to the crematorium. The guards referred to the victims as logs, muertos, and treated them like inanimate objects. Infected prisoners were sometimes put in with healthy ones to see how long the disease took to spread from human to human. They also wanted to know what the most effective way to infect healthy people was, so they experimented on that. Some of the research was deemed so disgusting, cruel, and nightmarish that it was thought to be important to not only keep it from the outside, but even from the sight of non-medical personnel. So, like, a lot of the worst experiments that they did were actually performed underground. Victims hung upside down from meat hooks and tortured, burnt with flamethrowers, had their arms and legs broken or just torn off with a stump. They were blown up with grenades. They actually had a range where they would put people on posts at pre-designated distances and angles away from a blast in the center of this room and have them tied to it when they set off this. And it would be, you know, like regular ordnance. Oh, this is what a U.S. grenade does. Let's try it out on these prisoners, or whatever it was that they were working on. They just wanted to get this information. So they would expose these people. And remember, we're not talking about just men. We're talking about women and children here, too. They, like was said before, lethal doses of X-rays were given to them. They were spun in centrifuges.
You know, I was going to say, that's pretty disgusting because you can set up, let's say like a dead animal, or even if you want to go that far, you could set up targets to have a blast go off to figure out at this distance, this much damage happens. At this distance, this much happens. And without using live bodies. So this was pretty much just evil, in my opinion.
Yeah.
This wasn't really, I mean, in reality, does it really matter when someone throws a grenade in your general direction? If you think, okay, if I'm at 30 feet, I'm okay. If I'm at, it's irrelevant at that point. You try and get as far away as you can. You know what I mean? This was simply, I understand it's information gathering, but it's more evil than just information gathering, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, you're right. And it goes back to their mindset, too. They thought of the prisoners that they got as being already basically dead. Now, they were going to use them and then kill them for the second time. So they didn't treat them at all like they were humans. They were just inanimate objects. And that whole mindset goes along with some of the weird stuff that they were doing with these people. I mean, the females were being raped not only by the guards, but also by the doctors and by other prisoners there. And they were getting these people from all over the place. Whenever they needed more quote-unquote logs, they would simply, General Ishii would call the emperor, And the emperor would just send in another consignment to fill up their little prison that they had there, up to 500 of them. And then they could use them for whatever weird experiments they wanted to do until they ran out. And if it just happened that they didn't have any mainland Chinese there, which were most of the people that were using for this, they would ship in prisoners of war, which meant there were Americans, Australian, and British servicemen that had been captured by the Japanese. They were sent to this death camp to be horribly mangled and then finally killed.
I think you got a phone call.
Yeah, I can't do it. That's just a text. So it wasn't like they were just doing this to, some certain group that they wanted to exterminate or anything. Anybody was open game. And again, in contravention to the usual protocols of civilized warfare, you're not supposed to be taking captured prisoners and using them for medical experiments. One of the other things that the military got tried for was just the general brutality that they treated the prisoners of war with. Some of these guys that were guards, like you hear about the Bataan Death March and stuff, they cut people's heads off with their samurai swords. All the officers carried them just because they could. And they'd have sword practice, and they'd, cut off a few guys' heads. Hey, they're prisoners. We can do that. And the whole concept was if you were a prisoner of war, you were automatically dishonored. You were lower than scum because you were so cowardly you didn't fight to the death. You didn't commit suicide. You actually let the other army capture you. That was like the most dishonorable thing you could do. So they treated the prisoners that they captured the same way. You're dishonorable scum. You didn't fight to the death or commit suicide. Whatever we do to you, you deserve it, sort of thing.
Yeah. What was the goal of Unit 731 beyond just the evilness of it? What were they trying to accomplish?
Well, beyond the random evil that they were getting away with, basically it was twofold. One was to get medical experimentation done on humans, and keep in mind that they didn't actually have dead cadavers that they were vivisecting. They had live human beings because they wanted to see the effects on the live organs of whatever it was that they were doing to them. And they didn't use anesthetics because, according to their reasoning, that would affect the results that they were getting. So this is just like the most heinous, horrible way of doing things you can imagine. Live dissections, vivisections. They wanted to get that medical information, and they were also doing mostly a lot of studies on biological warfare. They were trying to figure out how to make biological warfare workable in complete contravention to the Geneva Protocols that they signed in 25. So they were trying to, and they tried to do some of this stuff. One of the things that they were working on is were like fleas and spreading plague, bubonic plague most notably. And they actually had a working military program where they sent a bunch of balloons across the Pacific Ocean that were supposed to fall out of the sky on American soil. Well, a bunch of people know that they actually did that with some fire bombs. A couple of them, 2 or 3 of them actually worked, started a couple of forest fires. I think one burned a house down or something. But that was a complete failure. They tried to do the same thing with flea bombs, where they were sending fleas that had the Black Plague, and we're trying to get them to land on U.S. soil and start the bubonic plague, the Black Death over here, to kill us off. And actually 200 of these things landed on American soil. They failed. But that was their plan. And also at the very end of the war, they were going to crash land the same sort of little biological fun packages on our shore via kamikaze pilots, codename Operation Cherry Blossom. And they never got to pull it off because before that, we dropped some nukes on them and the war ended.
How does 731 correlate to the U.S. government? How is it related to the U.S. government?
Well, again, unlike a lot of the parts of the military over in Japan that were held accountable for some of the stuff that they did, General MacArthur wanted this information apparently bad enough that he thought it was worth cutting a deal and made so that all the members of Unit 731, the Emperor himself, and any of the members of the royal family would not be held accountable for anything that happened in Unit 731, as long as they got to have all of the same information that they had gathered during the course of this hideous behavior. And so that was why none of these people were ever put in front of a tribunal and tried for these war crimes. Unfortunately, not only were they not tried, Many of these people then later went on to be, quite elite medical professionals, businessmen, academicians, politicians. Here's some examples: Governor of Tokyo, President of the Japan Medical Association, Director of Japan's Olympic Committee, Director of the National Institute of Health, owner of the pharmaceutical company Green Cross, which has changed names many times. Over 10,000 people died in these experiments. So this medical establishment could have this information. And the deal with them that they not be prosecuted actually went even further than that, because on the one hand, you can say, well, that was pretty horrible and ruthless that the U.S. let them get away with that so we could get that information. In 1950, when the Korean War was going on, General MacArthur, the same person that got these people off the hook, also went ahead and reformed Unit 731 with some of the same people and put it in Korea. They were reassembled and went back to work in 1950, and of course this time being paid for by the U.S. and working for our military during the Korean War. So we are just as complicit in this shit as they were, because we had them doing the same damn thing to Korean and Chinese captured prisoners during the Korean War that they were doing to Chinese nationals and American, Australian, and British prisoners in World War II. So
it's amazing, isn't it?
It's absolutely horrible, and I'd like people to know at this point what my viewpoint is on this. I'm a patriotic American. I love this country, but I hate our government. I think that they're a bunch of underhanded bastards. They've been taken over by the military-industrial complex, and we have no control over them whatsoever. That's my stand on the whole thing. So I just want y'all to know that when I'm exposing something like this that our nasty government has done, I'm not hating on the U.S. I love the American people. I love this country. I love what it supposedly stands for, but doesn't seem to be doing properly anymore. And I just want everybody to know that, this sort of thing is going on. Those people that we trust to see after our best interests are doing horrible things in our name, just like the people that were doing horrible things in the names of the German people, or the Japanese people, or the Russian people. No government is made of goody two-shoes, 100% heroes. They're all bad. They've all made mistakes. Some of them are worse than others. And the ones that are trying to run empires are the ones that frequently get drug into this sort of crap. And how does this relate to Phil Schneider and what we were talking before? Well, we were talking about how there's this conspiracy that there's these aliens and they have bases underground. And according to a treaty that they had made with us, supposedly, that they were getting their pick of humans that they could drag underground and do experiments on and stuff. And to a lot of people, the idea is just so far-fetched, even above and beyond, okay, maybe there could be some aliens or something involved. How could our government let them do anything like this? There's no way our government would collaborate with them to do something like this. Well, think about the fact that our government collaborated with the Japanese, with Emperor Hirohito, with all of those complicit and responsible for Unit 731, to lay no blame on them whatsoever, as long as we could have that medical data. That's only medical data. What would they be willing to do for ridiculously high-tech weaponry or defensive systems that would put us decades, maybe a century ahead of everybody else's technology if they thought they could get that? Would they be willing to torture some people? Would they be willing to let aliens maybe capture some people that were, kind of marginal? Maybe nobody will miss them. Yeah, go ahead, And the deal supposedly was that they could get away with doing some of this, but they had to give the government a list of who it was that they were abducting, and they had to return them. Well, right out of the gate, they started not giving complete lists. The government, of course, was following this abduction thing around, which is why you see these men in black showing up after alien abductions. Well, they're checking on what their alien, what the aliens are doing when, they're supposed to be doing this, and they're maybe doing B and C instead of A. So, and then they started, of course, getting lots of abduction reports from people that were not being reported by the aliens as being on their list and whatnot. So, are they following the agreement? Hell no. Are we getting the super high tech that we're supposed to be? Probably, or, you know, some of it, or they're going to give us a little bit so that we can feel like we're getting something and not make too much of a stink about thousands of people disappearing every year all across the world, you know, perhaps a million.
Yeah, it's amazing to me when you start looking into like Unit 731 or us taking Nazi scientists over, or one thing after another. You start to realize all governments are dirty. It's just a question of how much have they let it out publicly that how dirty they really are. Yep. And I know we have this mentality in the great US of A that we're better than everyone else and we're the just, and you know, we're the most sane country on the planet, which, you know, for the most part might be true, but that's neither here nor there. The government is just as dirty as the Afghanistan, you know, as Afghanistan's, or as the Chinese, or as the Russians, just as dirty as the rest of them. And it's just amazing to me that this stuff goes on. I hadn't heard of 731. I knew I'd known about the Japanese having that, people knowing don't get caught by the Japanese because they'll torture you to death.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how bad it actually was with this Unit 731. And the fact that we basically started applying the same techniques they're doing during the Korean War is appalling. This video was hard to watch. The teaser I put up, it was hard for me to watch, and I put it together. It was really, really hard to watch some of that stuff that was going on. And so I think you're right, as far as the Phil Schneider incident, how this all kind of relates back to World War II, it's not too far off to believe that this stuff goes on. You know, if you don't believe in the alien thing, what if I told you that the government had no problem about keeping people in cages and doing experiments on them? Is it really that crazy of an idea? Is it really that offensive, you know?
Well, and we know lots of examples firsthand, information that's leaked out about the government in the 50s and the 60s doing like biological testing on American population. Oh, let's drop this virus by air and see if the people in town actually get sick from it. You know, it's a cheap and easy way. The most that they'll do is get the flu, which is what we're trying to do, is give them the flu. Let's see how it works and see how many of it actually affects. You know, they've been doing this crap since the end of World War II to us. And it comes as a big shock that maybe they would allow these aliens from, you know, wherever it is that they're from. I'm not saying they're from some other planet, whatever. We'll get into that later. But they're going to allow them to, you know, take a few humans and do experiments on them. And in return, we'll not only get to share data with them, but, you know, they'll be giving us all this nifty high-tech stuff that we can work on, you know, and add to our shadow government's powerful arsenal that they're not letting the regular establishment know anything about. So, and the other thing that always gets me is the people that are into the whole, you know, aliens are from another planet. They're really high tech. They've come here from long distance across space, and therefore their technology has been around, their civilization has been around long enough that they've overcome some of these social issues, and they're not warlike and aggressive anymore, because if they were, they would have wiped themselves out before they got here. Well, okay, let's use some examples from our own history. How about, you guys ever heard of the conquistadors? The conquistadors had technology a long ways ahead of the people that they came over here to visit. And it didn't work out so well for those people that they came to visit now, did it?
Yeah, it's true.
And then, you know, you look at the example in World War II again, and at the time that World War II broke out, Germany was the most literate and most technologically advanced country on Earth. And yet they had the death camps there, and the pogroms against the Jews, and, you know, all of the horrible shit that was happening there. And, you know, it was just, it's not connected. Just because a being is really intelligent doesn't mean they have morals, doesn't mean they look at things through what we consider to be a moral light, in the very least. And more than likely, it's just going to turn out badly for the lesser civilization. The history on Earth has just shown that time and time again. We've got a more advanced force goes and meets a less advanced force. It usually works out really badly for the less advanced force, whether they even intended to or not. Look at when the first colonists came here to the United States. and accidentally spread all these disease germs among all the Indian tribes. They had no intention of doing that. It was just stuff they were immune to over in Europe. They got here and exposed the natives to it, and there was like millions of them that died before we even basically got off the East Coast. We weren't even aware that we had wiped out most of them.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to get into was the maybe we should wait and do another show on it, the Nazi bell.
Yeah, that's sort of, if you want to know the back...
Because I really want to tell my time traveler story. My time traveler story. But the bell, the reason why I think it might take a whole show is, and everyone calls BS on the bell, but isn't it funny, after the war ended, coincidentally, we had the same type of vehicle crash, what was it, in Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
A couple of years after the war.
The Kecksburg Acorn, which just came flying out of the blue, crashed there. Boom, instantly the military's there recovering it. And the description of it and dimensions exactly match the Nazi bell. Sheer coincidence, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing to me. And, going back to my little time traveler story, because some of this stuff, I think, coincides with one another. It makes you wonder what technology that they have or have currently or have had and forgotten that we haven't even had access to yet, that we have no clue what's going on. You know what I mean?
Well, just for the teaser for you guys, we keep talking about the bell. It was the big, ultimate, supposedly war-winning technological thing the Germans were working on. It was classified as above top secret. It was what they considered to be the above anything else priority project. If there was like any disputes over who got materials or people to work on certain projects, the bell won every time. And it had like 4 layers of security around it. They built its own installation just to test this thing on. They had their own prisoner of war camp nearby. They had a gigantic facility that they built for electricity just to supply this experiment. And what they were trying to do was use torsion vortex technology to create space-time ruptures. So that goes into invisibility, it goes into stargates, it goes into anti-gravity, it goes into all sorts of weird effects that you can get off of this sort of thing. And that's basically what they were working with.